this is to remind everyone that you can watch Chronicles or Journeys, Chronicles of Our Asian Century on Facebook and YouTube. It's archived and you can watch it segment by segment, meaning 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So if you are in a hurry, you can catch up later on. Okay, now to segue from what how we ended in the first discussion, the history of China in the Philippines has been of 1,000 years or more, 1,200 years by some other historians. And this year is a very significant year because this is going to be the 600th year by the 2017 of the travel of the Sultan of Sulu with 300 of his entourage in 1417, 600 years ago. And that relationship prospered the Philippines. And that is why the Sultan of Sulu at that time went to his, he was declared the brother of the Yellow Emperor, the Emperor of China, Yongle. Or the Yongle dynasty. Now, even the galleon trade benefited from the silk, porcelain, and the tea from China, that which Manila brought to Acapulco. 90% of the goods there were these three items from China. And before we go on to the hope of change with the incoming Duterte administration on the matters of foreign policy, you have any insight on this history between China and the Philippines, Mr. Ambassador?
Yeah, I would like to say something about that. Starting with what you said about the Sultan of Sulu. Next year we will be celebrating the 600th anniversary.
Yes.
And that means that the Sultan of Sulu went to China a century ahead of the discovery of the Philippines by Spain.
Discovery in quotes.
In quotes, yes. Well, discovered for Europe.
For Europe, yeah.
Yes. So that means that our relationship with China antedated European influence.
That's right.
And don't forget that the laws of the sea began to be defined only during the Treaty of Tordesillas, which means again...
When was this?
Well, that was just about the time of the discovery of the Philippines.
Okay.
So the point there is, if you talk about the sea and laws of the sea and whatever, we had our own regional custom already in relation to the seas before, the coming of the Europeans and the introduction of the Western rules of order of the sea.
Okay, you mentioned Tordesillas. That's interesting, an interesting coincidence because we'll discuss the article of Ellen Tordesillas later on on who lost Scarborough. Although my reaction to that is, did we lose Scarborough? We can still talk to China and share Scarborough. There are so many other possibilities. But
for me, it's a hanging thing, because what happened was a fluid situation where there were supposedly two claimants, but then the question really is, how do you resolve this? It is not yet resolved.
Yes, precisely. That's why it's too early to say we lost.
Exactly. And that's right. I agree.
And it's also too early to say that is ours.
Exactly.
Because there is always that possibility of sharing. That's I hope we can work with China if we have that dialogue. Which your candidate in the last election, I was surprised. You are a very sophisticated man, as I was telling you. And you supported what I described as rustic, which is just a description, and it's not actually a fact that it's just my description. But I was asking you to explain to me why you chose Duterte as your candidate in the last election.
Well, I may not have really consciously chosen the man. The thing is, where I'm coming from, having in relation to love the sea, regional rules order, and the Spratlys Archipelago situation, we have been through 6 years of very, not very good experience. So I was just looking for somebody who could make the change. Well, of course, I made the point, I have been making the point that even if the administration's candidate had won, it is really inevitable for a review to happen. But I laid my bet on President Duterte.
But did Duterte's early pronouncement saying he will open bilateral talks with China. I think during the course of the campaign and the debates,
Yes.
he's already said that.
Yes.
Did that was that a factor in your support for Duterte?
In a way, yes, because precisely of that. Okay, timeline is when you said before the elections.
Yeah.
So that was talking about platforms.
That's right. That's
And I was attracted to what he said, that he will go into negotiations. I think really that's the only way to go anyway, you know. And yes, it was a factor that after it was clear, however, that he was gonna be the presumptive president-elect. I think he spoke too soon on a lot of issues about China.
Yeah, on the other issues. But speaking very early and meeting the Chinese ambassador produced immediate happy results.
Yes.
Scarborough is now, let's say, open for everybody, including Filipino fishermen, to fish again. And the Filipino fishermen from Zambales and Pangasinan expressed their thanks to Duterte.
Yes.
Without is even formally having bilateral talks yet,
Yes.
good results have been produced.
But what does this mean? In the diplomacy side, it was good of the Chinese ambassador immediately to seek an audience with our presumptive president. Yes. On the other hand, when President-elect Duterte made a specific request to ease the situation in the Scarborough Shoal, China responded right away,
That's
favorably. Now the thing is, that is really just trying to open
The
negotiations,
yes, yeah,
consultations,
yeah.
conversations. It is not supposed to settle anything yet.
Not yet. Yeah.
So that would have been that was a good gesture,
That's
early
right.
gesture, and I can only hope that it could lead to something.
But there are forces, as you and I are aware, trying to stop any bilateral talks, opening bilateral talks. I can name them. In fact, Justice Carpio, months before, has said the next administration must do this when pursue the arbitration, and because China will be isolated when the judgment comes out. What's your reaction there?
Well, of course, Justice Carpio has been very much in the news and very visible, but I would not put any political color to what he said. I would like to bring more to the fore his legal background, but I do not. Sorry, but I
Yes.
don't agree with him.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Is he also an expert in international law, as you are? Or he is in the regular constitutional law and so on? I'm sorry. Maybe I'm putting you on the spot as a lawyer too and a professional.
But I can say something about it.
Yes, please.
For example, his early pronouncements really does not show any good grounding on international law. And I will mention one thing, which I can say to his face. When he made the distinction of between customary international law and conventional international law in relation to citizenship, there was no such thing. On that event alone, I saw that he didn't have much grounding on international law.
Okay. Let me see. So there's also this arbitration issue now. Let's move on to that. And this is often repeated that China will be isolated. I think we'll also have to mention that there's degrees of misinformation and disinformation. Before we go to that slide, let's look at the Inquirer report on Beijing lines up diplomatic battle groups over South China Sea. If you note that, but we cannot highlight the details. I'll just read to you one point. Niger joined the ranks of over 40 countries that have officially endorsed China's position. Why do they focus on Niger, a small country in Africa? And so what they're trying to portray is China has this little country siding with it. But let us show the slide again to remind, there's also another line in this report that, but other than its main diplomatic partner, Russia, few heavy hitters have come out in support with Beijing's neighbors, many of them unnerved by its increasingly assertive behavior. It's good, it's just assertive. It used to be aggressive behavior.
Yes.
So there is some toning down of this language. But let's show that slide with China, Russia, and India. Because India has joined Russia and China in saying that in such cases,
Negotiations.
yeah, please go ahead now. Internationalization is not advisable. It doesn't solve it. And they advise bilateral negotiations between the countries that are really involved. You know. So we don't have to show because the other slides, because we are running out of time, but the Shanghai Cooperation Organization has made the same statement. The Arab League has made the same statement. And several countries of ASEAN have made the same statement. So I just like to make sure the audience knows that what you read in the mainstream media is heavily influenced by American, in this case, Reuters, or Agence France Presse, and so on. They will all be a little biased against China. Anyway, Ambassador.
I was disturbed by that. I read the report, and what disturbed me is this, that, very simple actually, that behind the Philippines arbitration and is of course the United States and say EU and a few other G7 and to the author, these are big hitters, heavy hitters. When it comes to Shanghai Cooperation Organization, although there are quite a few more countries there, and Russia, India, and China, these are inconsequential organizations. How do you figure these things out?
That's right. Yeah.
That's the first point. The organizations behind the Americans are heavy hitters. Organizations behind China are inconsequential. Okay?
Yeah, inconsequential.
Now, another aspect there that disturbs me is calling countries like Niger and as inconsequential countries.
That's right.
This does not play in an international organization because all states are equal. You know, sovereign states are all equal.
Yeah, that's right.
And the weight of one, you know, well, it does not play out actually that well in the United Nations because of the veto power, you know. But in theory, at least, in principle, all states are equal. Now, if you say, especially relating to the law of the sea, that there are inconsequential states, the law of the sea is called has become a universal treaty and has gone beyond being conventional to accepted customary because of the number of signatories. Now, these 170 signatories, 178 I think, are all equal of weight as a state, you know.
Yeah.
But to call some as inconsequential was not good. Now, let me put it this way. If China is successful in shepherding its own followers, you know, and China decides to denounce the treaty.
That's right. That's right.
And there is some talk in the among the academic sectors in China that is a possibility.
Yes, yes.
If it loses badly or is not happy with how it is treated in the arbitration case, China can denounce it. With that fact alone, two major countries, major maritime countries in the world are automatically out of UNCLOS. Which are these countries? China and the United States of America. Don't forget, the United States is not a member of UNCLOS. Now, if Venezuela follows suit, and Russia, and these so many inconsequential states, what will happen to UNCLOS? There will be no more rules.
That's right.
That may bring us back to a very undesirable situation of, the chaotic rules of the sea order, you know. But the point is, that is where this direction is bringing us. Isolating China, demonizing China, all sorts of spin, you know, against China.
And I hear from the Western press that China will have to face world public opinion. Is this a matter of opinion?
No, I'm glad you raised that point also, because again, I talk from the diplomacy point of view. No state can ever be shamed into doing anything.
That's
okay?
right. Yeah. You're sovereign. They're sovereign.
Yes,
states,
and besides, these are faces these are not human faces. These are faces of people and states. You know, so anything that a state does might be inconsistent, might be unconventional, might be anything. It will never cause a loss of face. Let me put it this way, very directly. If you talk about events that could have caused a loss of face to a state, America would be the most shameless state. You know?
That's right. Yeah. So many violations of
Exactly.
international mores.
Exactly. Now, so let's not talk about China being shamed into anything. Can I take up one more point about this?
Go ahead.
Yes.
We'll eat from the next segment for a few minutes.
Because Justice Carpio, I listened to his lecture at the Insular Life Building, said that, okay, it was also in the media that China could be shamed into
That's right,
implementing the expected favorable decision of the
Why are they so
arbiter-
confident? No, anyway.
Yes. Anyway, Justice Carpio cited the case of Nicaragua versus the United
That's right,
States,
yeah.
in which it was a consensual reference to an international court.
Yeah.
It is not compulsory like what we have against
That's
China.
right, yeah.
But despite being consensual, when the United States lost the case, it refused to follow the award of the court.
That's what I have been stressing. I have been stressing that. But
now-
Carpio said they complied.
Yes. How? According to Justice Carpio, and this gives us hope in case China does not honor the decision of the arbitration court. They said that because the United States, because Nicaragua brought the case to the United Nations and General Assembly and began campaigning against the United States on this issue. But did the United States feel it was shamed? No.
Yeah.
It just paid the award simply because it was the best thing it can do at the time for itself, you know. So, but the big point there, Mr. Laurel, is this: in a consensual reference, the United States even violated. I mean, we expect China not to, we demonize China because it is expected not to follow the arbitration award, which it never accepted.
That's right.
But here is the United States in a consensual reference to to an international court, in the end refusing to honor it unless it was shamed in the General Assembly.
And it's very clear China will not face that for various reasons, including the support that it is now mustering from the other side of the world. It cannot happen. And also, from my understanding and my research, the U.S. paid a sum as aid to the Chamorro government. But anyway, there are different interpretations.
That's political nuances.
That's right. Anyway, we've run out of time for this segment. We have 2 items, but we'll reserve that for future discussions.
Okay, fine.
Okay, so we'll take this break and stay on because we'll have 2 very young, wonderful musicians from the UP School of Music play a few songs for us. And maybe you can sing along. Okay, let's take this break.